The vote to banish Earth passed with thunderous applause. Not literal thunder. The concordance chamber was too refined for that. Applause here came as synchronized pulses of bioluminescent approval, polite clicks of mandibles, ripples of chromatic skin patterns. Civilized celebration. They had done it. They had finally dealt with the problem. Earth. A gravity-heavy, storm-ridden death world that had clawed its way into the interstellar community with calloused hands and a grin that made diplomats nervous. 23 cycles of uncomfortable meetings. 23 cycles of humans smiling too easily during security briefings and asking questions about fleet response times. The final tally shimmered in the air above the chamber floor. Unanimous. Speaker Thauron rose from his crescent dais, robes of office whispering across polished crystal. By authority of the Galactic Concordance, the species known as humanity is hereby expelled beyond the Persis exclusion boundary. All treaties nullified. All defense pacts dissolved. Any human vessel crossing into Concordance space will be seized. The chamber glowed with satisfaction. High Delegate XYR of the Velth Dominion flexed his bladed forelimbs in restrained triumph. Order is restored. A murmur of agreement followed. Humans were disruptive. They armed civilian ships. They escorted trade convoys without being asked. They had the audacity to chase pirates into neutral zones and then invoiced the rescued merchants afterward, with interest. Worst of all, they laughed. They laughed during war games. They laughed when threatened. They laughed when outnumbered. It unsettled the older species. A junior aide scuttled to XYR's side, chittering urgently. High Delegate, human fleet movements have increased along the exclusion boundary. Of course they have. XYR snapped. They posture. It is what primates do. The speaker raised his scepter to conclude proceedings. And the chamber doors opened. No explosion. No alarms. They simply opened. Every security drone in the hall pivoted as one. A single human stepped inside. Mid-50s, perhaps. Silver threaded through dark hair. Tailored charcoal suit. No visible weapons. No escort. He walked with the unhurried gait of a man entering a boardroom rather than a hostile assembly of alien powers. Apologies, he said mildly, voice carrying without amplification. Traffic outside your jurisdictional perimeter is dreadful this time of cycle. Security fields snapped into place around him. Identify yourself, Thauron demanded. The human inclined his head slightly. Ambassador Elias Ward, United Earth Directorate. You were not granted floor access, XYR hissed. Ward glanced up at the floating vote tally. Clearly. A flicker of something, amusement, crossed his face. I'll keep this brief. We received notification of your decision. You have been lawfully expelled, Thauron said. There is nothing to discuss. Ward clasped his hands behind his back. Oh, I'm not here to discuss the vote. He tapped the small data band at his wrist. The chamber lights dimmed. Every display panel flickered, then reconfigured. A star map bloomed into existence. Trade routes, thousands of them, glowed gold across the quadrant. A soft ripple moved through the delegates. Standard logistics overlay. Then the gold lines began to wink out. One by one. Shipping lanes dimmed. Fuel convoys vanished. Medical transport corridors collapsed into blank space. What is this interference? XYR demanded. It isn't, Ward replied calmly. It's a withdrawal. He gestured lightly toward the map. 42% of your heavy freight transport is operated by human contractors. 31% of your rare mineral refinement is processed in Earth-adjacent facilities. 60% of your frontier anti-piracy patrols are human-led. More lines went dark. You voted to sever relations, Ward continued. We have complied. A tremor of unease rippled through the chamber. That is economic sabotage, Thauron said sharply. Ward met his gaze. No. It's independence. The map zoomed outward. Beyond the Persis exclusion boundary, thousands of transponder signals flared to life. Human vessels. merchant ships, terraforming barges, hospital frigates, and warships. Rows of them. Gunmetal hulls scarred and practical. No ornamental flourishes. Engines burning hot and steady. You were under the impression, Ward said, that our recent fleet expansion was excessive. XYR's voice thinned. You claimed it was for internal security. Ward's smile was small and tired. It was. A new image replaced the map. Velth patrol ships forming up along the exclusion boundary, clearly intending to enforce the banishment immediately, make a statement. Behind them, space shimmered. Then split. Human warships decloaked in tight formation. Railgun capacitors flared like captured lightning. A collective intake of breath passed through the chamber. You cannot initiate hostilities, Thalron said. You are no longer a recognized member state. Ward's expression hardened, just slightly. Exactly. The first railgun round struck a Velth cruiser mid-hull. The live feed showed the impact in brutal clarity, kinetic energy punching through shields never designed for that kind of violence. The cruiser folded inward, atmosphere venting in a silent blossom. Screams filled Velth command channels. In the chamber, several delegates recoiled. Ward didn't look away. You mistook procedure for power, he said quietly. You thought expelling us would make us smaller. On screen, human ships advanced, not in rigid parade lines, but in aggressive, efficient vectors. Missile bays opened. Point defense grids lit space into a lattice of lethal geometry. Another Velth ship disintegrated under concentrated fire. You wanted us outside your borders, Ward continued. Congratulations. We are now entirely outside your control. XYR's forelimbs trembled. This is war. Ward considered that. No, he said softly. This is a correction. The map shifted again. Human civilian convoys were already moving deeper beyond the boundary, toward volatile systems the Concordants had labeled uninhabitable. Radiation-swept stars. Rogue planets. Regions abandoned as too dangerous to exploit. You cannot survive there, Thalron whispered. Ward's eyes flicked toward him. You've never been to Earth, have you? Another railgun strike obliterated the Velth flagship. The feed glitched, then stabilized on drifting wreckage and disabled ships, human boarding craft latching onto survivors. Ward exhaled slowly. You passed your vote, he said. Now we're passing ours. The chamber felt colder. Earth will not cross your boundary again, Ward added. We won't need to. He turned toward the doors. And when the dark between your stars starts moving again, when the pirates you hired us to chase remember you're unguarded, you'll understand something. He paused at the threshold. You don't exile a species that evolved on a death world. The doors slid shut behind him. In the stunned silence that followed, another alert chimed across every delegate's console. Multiple frontier trade routes under attack. Pirate signals reactivating. Outer colonies requesting emergency defense assistance. The gold lines on the map continued to fade. And beyond the Persis exclusion boundary, humanity's engines burned brighter. The first month after the banishment was quiet. That should have terrified them. Instead, the Concordance congratulated itself. Markets adjusted, poorly, but optimistically. Replacement shipping contracts were drafted. Velth patrol fleets expanded their presence along the Persis exclusion boundary, broadcasting dominance to compensate for the wreckage still drifting there. Official statements described Earth's withdrawal as regrettable but manageable. Then the pirate signals returned. They didn't sneak back. They announced themselves. Convoys began vanishing along the outer trade arcs, ships stripped of cargo, crews ransomed or spaced depending on how difficult they had been during negotiations. Mining colonies on the fringe reported shadow signatures in orbit. Agricultural worlds lost entire harvest shipments overnight. For decades, those regions had been statistically stable. Because humans had been there. Not officially. Not under Concordance banners. Just there. Armed freighters escorting grain ships. Independent contractors, who happened to respond to distress calls faster than bureaucratic fleets. Now the dark was empty. And something else had noticed. On the edge of Cythera's orbit, 6 pirate cruisers formed a loose blockade, their hulls mismatched and ugly, scavenged plating welded over older warship frames. They didn't look refined. They looked hungry. Cythera's governor transmitted on open channel, voice trembling. By authority of the Galactic Concordance, you are in violation of. A plasma lance lanced downward, carving a molten scar across one of the planet's atmospheric defense arrays. The pirate captain's image filled the transmission. Scarred. Grinning. Confident. Call your concordance, he said. We'll wait. Across the quadrant, similar messages echoed. And in the concordance chamber, panic finally overpowered pride. High Delegate HFY slammed a forelimb against his console. Deploy the 3rd Velth Armada. They are already mobilized, an aide replied. Estimated arrival at Cythera, 9 standard days. 9. HFY's mandibles flared. The colony will not last 9 days. Speaker Thalrin remained still, but his eyes had lost their earlier certainty. How long? He asked quietly. Did it take human patrol groups to respond to outer sector distress calls? The aide hesitated. On average, 6 hours. Silence fell like a dropped blade. Beyond the exclusion boundary, humanity was busy. They hadn't retreated. They had expanded. Massive mobile shipyards unfolded in orbit around unstable stars, constructing vessels with a speed that made older species uncomfortable. Terraforming rigs seeded rogue planets with atmospheric processors. Entire colony arcs drifted in formation like patient leviathans. And surrounding it all, warships. More than the Concordance had estimated. Admiral Naomi Iqbal stood on the bridge of the HNS Resolute, watching a tactical projection rotate slowly before her. Pirate movements were spiking along former human patrol corridors. Her communications officer glanced up. Multiple distress signals from Concordance Frontier Systems, ma'am. They're not addressed to us. Iqbal allowed herself a thin smile. They will be. A junior officer cleared his throat. Respectfully, Admiral, are we responding? Iqbal folded her hands behind her back. Negative. The bridge crew shifted uneasily. Ma'am? They voted, she said evenly. They enforced. They made their rules clear. Her gaze remained on the projection. Now we're making ours. On Cythera, the pirate blockade tightened. Orbital platforms were disabled one by one. Merchant ships attempting to flee were crippled and boarded. The governor sent another desperate plea, this time on every frequency, including the old human emergency bands long thought obsolete. The pirate captain laughed when he intercepted it. Beg louder, he advised. Then space warped. Not the smooth ripple of standard concordance drives. This was violent. Abrupt. 3 human destroyers tore into real space above the pirate formation, hulls dark and angular, railgun capacitors already glowing. The pirate captain's grin faltered. You were banished, he said. The human response came instantly. Yeah, the destroyer commander replied. Didn't stick. The first volley shattered a pirate cruiser before its shields fully powered. The second volley punched through another, venting atmosphere in a spinning spiral of debris. The remaining pirate ships scattered, too late. Human corvettes flanked them with ruthless precision, engines burning white. Point defense cannons shredded missile counterattacks. Boarding pods launched in tight arcs, magnetic clamps slamming into hull plating. Inside one pirate vessel, chaos erupted as the breach charges detonated. Through smoke and sparks stepped armored figures in matte black exosuits. The pirate captain drew a plasma pistol, hands shaking. A human marine tilted his helmet slightly. Bad day? The marine asked. The firefight lasted 4 minutes. It felt longer. When it ended, the pirate crews were disarmed, bound, and very much alive. The human commander reopened the planetary channel. Cythera Governor, this is United Earth Fleet Patrol Group 7. Your orbit is secure. The governor stared at the transmission feed in disbelief. You have no jurisdiction here. Correct, the commander replied. But we do have a sense of professional pride. News of Sithra spread fast. So did similar engagements. Human task forces struck pirate clusters across multiple systems with terrifying efficiency. They didn't just repel attacks, they traced supply chains, dismantled hidden shipyards, and arrested financiers who had assumed Earth's absence meant open season. Entire criminal networks collapsed in weeks. And with every victory, a message was transmitted, public, unencrypted. Humanity does not recognize the legality of its own banishment. Back in the Concordance chamber, the mood had shifted from indignation to something far more uncomfortable. Dependence. They are operating freely within our borders, HFY said, subdued. Thalrin studied casualty reports. They are preventing our collapse. That does not grant them authority. No, Thalrin agreed quietly. It grants them leverage. As if summoned by the word, a new transmission request appeared in the chamber. Origin, United Earth Directorate. The chamber lights dimmed as Admiral Iqbal's image materialized above the central dais. She looked composed. Unhurried. Good evening, she began. HFY's tone was brittle. You are violating Concordance territory. Iqbal nodded. Yes. The bluntness startled them. You were expelled, Thalrin said carefully. Your presence is unauthorized. Iqbal's eyes hardened. When your outer colonies burned, your authorized fleets were 9 days away. She let that hang in the air. We were 6 hours away. A ripple of shame passed through the delegates. You cannot simply ignore our ruling, HFY insisted. Iqbal leaned slightly closer to the projection field. You mistook expulsion for control. Behind her, the projection shifted, showing pirate warships in flames, rescued convoys reforming under human escort. You don't get to vote us out of existence, she said calmly. And you don't get to demand our help without consequence. Thalrin's voice lowered. What consequence? Iqbal's gaze sharpened. You want stability? She asked. You want your trade routes secure and your colonies protected? A pause. Then you acknowledge reality. The projection zoomed outward. Human fleets weren't just reacting. They were positioning. Strategically. Across key choke points. Resource hubs. Frontier systems. They were building a security network that did not require Concordance approval. You believed we were junior members, Iqbal continued. A useful auxiliary. She allowed herself the faintest hint of a smile. We are not auxiliary. The chamber was silent. Outside their protected core worlds, human warships moved with predatory confidence. The Concordance had voted to banish Earth. Instead, they had removed the only leash they thought existed. And now humanity was operating not as a member, but as a power. A power that had just demonstrated it could protect the galaxy faster, harder, and more decisively than the civilization that tried to cast it out. And for the first time since the vote, the Concordance understood something bone-deep and irreversible. They hadn't exiled the problem. They had unleashed a competitor. By the 3rd month, the word banishment had quietly disappeared from official Concordance statements. It was now referred to as a temporary jurisdictional separation. That was how politicians admitted mistakes without admitting them. Unfortunately, pirates did not respect terminology. The outer systems were bleeding credits, ships, and confidence. Insurance syndicates were collapsing. Merchant guilds were openly hiring human escorts under private contract clauses that skirted the original expulsion ruling. The truth was ugly and impossible to suppress. The galaxy functioned better when humans were armed and nearby. In the Velth Dominion, High Delegate HFY stood before a War Council projection, staring at the remains of his 3rd Armada. Not destroyed, embarrassed. Repeatedly intercepted by pirate flotillas that scattered before formal engagement protocols could even initialize. Our fleet doctrine was designed for state conflict, one Velth tactician admitted stiffly. These adversaries do not behave like states. No, HFY muttered. They behave like humans. That was the uncomfortable part. Pirates had adapted to the old Concordance playbook: predictable response times, formal battle lines, rules of engagement that required paperwork before bloodshed. Humans had never quite followed that rhythm. They responded asymmetrically. They ambushed ambushers. They hunted supply chains instead of just fleets. And now they were doing it again, without asking permission. In the frontier system of Kalis Run, a pirate stronghold hidden inside a shattered moon finally revealed itself by attacking the wrong convoy. The convoy was bait. Human intelligence had mapped the pirate logistics network weeks earlier. Rather than strike immediately, they let the pirates feel comfortable, profitable, bold. Then Admiral Iqbal gave the order. The HNS Resolute and 5 strike cruisers emerged from Hardburn Warp inside the moon's debris field, dangerously close to gravitational shear. "Helm, stabilize. Target the inner docks," Iqbal said calmly. Her tactical officer swallowed. "Ma'am, debris density is extreme." Iqbal's eyes never left the display. "So are we," railguns thundered. Not at ships. At the hollowed moon itself. Precise kinetic strikes collapsed docking bays and shield emitters in seconds. Pirate vessels scrambled to launch, smashing into tumbling rock as artificial gravity failed. "Broadcast surrender terms," Iqbal ordered. The pirate warlord's face filled the screen, older, scarred, furious. "You don't have authority here," he spat. Iqbal tilted her head slightly. "Neither do you." Missile salvos streaked from hidden pirate silos. Human point defense shredded them in sheets of incandescent debris. Then the Marines launched. Boarding torpedoes punched through the moon's fractured hull. Inside, fighting was brutal and intimate, shotguns in low gravity, mag boots clanging against metal floors slick with coolant and blood. Sergeant Miguel Alvarez led one of the entry teams. At 62, he had retired twice and returned 3 times. His armor was scarred. His voice was gravel wrapped in sarcasm. A pirate lunged from a side corridor. Alvarez stepped aside and drove his armored shoulder into the man's chest, pinning him against bulkhead plating. "You boys picked the wrong retirement hobby," Alvarez muttered, securing the prisoner. Within 20 minutes, Kalis Run was silent. Pirate leadership was in custody. Their financial records, painstakingly archived, were in human hands. When the Concordance received the data dump, the scale of the corruption became clear. Several minor member states had quietly funded pirate groups to destabilize rivals, including wealth interests. XYR stared at the evidence, mandibles trembling, not from rage this time, but from exposure. "They have this information?" he asked. "Yes, High Delegate. And they have not released it publicly?" "Correct." XYR sank slowly into his command cradle. "They are choosing not to humiliate us." Back on Earth, Ambassador Ward stood before a quiet council chamber overlooking the Atlantic. Screens displayed Concordance financial data, political fractures, distress calls. "They're cracking," one advisor observed. Ward nodded. "They were stable because we absorbed the shock. And now? Now they understand the cost of pretending we were optional." A secure channel chimed. "Incoming, Speaker Thalrin." Ward accepted. The alien leader looked older than he had during the vote. Less certain. "You are consolidating influence," Thalrin said without accusation. "We're stabilizing trade," Ward corrected gently. "Under your protection." Ward folded his hands. "Under effective protection." A long pause. "Our fleets are insufficient," Thalrin admitted. "Our outer colonies increasingly request human oversight directly." Ward said nothing. Thalrin's voice lowered. "You are becoming indispensable." Ward's expression didn't change. "We always were." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Thalrin asked the question that mattered. "What do you want?" Ward walked toward the viewport, waves crashing far below. "We want acknowledgement," he said. "Not gratitude. Not praise." He turned back. Reality. In Velt space, unrest was growing. Outer colonies had begun flying dual transponders, Velt registry and human escort contracts. Velth citizens were openly praising Earth fleets on public networks. It was humiliating. It was also necessary. When a Velth agricultural world came under coordinated pirate assault, 3 flotillas striking simultaneously, Velth Command froze for 12 critical minutes debating jurisdiction. Human Patrol Group 9 did not debate. They jumped. The battle was savage. Pirate cruisers, better armed this time, focused fire on the lead human destroyer. Shields collapsed. Hull plating ruptured. Damage control, Section 3! A human officer shouted as atmosphere vented. Iqbal watched the feed remotely from the Resolute, jaw tight. Reinforce them. 2 human battlecruisers exited warp behind the pirate formation and fired at near point-blank range. 1 pirate vessel split in half before its crew understood the geometry of their mistake. The remaining attackers attempted to retreat. Human ships did not permit it. They pursued beyond the system boundary, crippling engines and capturing crews. When it was over, the Velth governor transmitted shakily. We are in your debt." The human captain wiped blood from his brow. "No," he replied. "You're in our perimeter." That line spread across the networks like wildfire. "You're in our perimeter." Not a boast. A statement. The Concordance had tried to push humanity beyond its borders. Instead, humanity had expanded its definition of responsibility. And with every battle won, every colony saved, every pirate syndicate dismantled, one truth settled into the political consciousness of the galaxy. Power was not declared in chambers. It was demonstrated in crises. By the end of the quarter, human fleets occupied strategic choke points across 3 major trade corridors. Not as conquerors. As guardians. But guardians who did not ask permission anymore. And in the Concordance chamber, as reports scrolled and outer systems stabilized under human oversight, Speaker Thalran finally voiced the fear no one else would. "If we attempt to expel them again," XYR finished the thought quietly, "we won't survive the consequences." Because the crushing twist was no longer theoretical. The galaxy hadn't merely failed to banish Earth. It had created a power that no longer needed membership to dominate the board. And humanity, patient and watchful, was now holding every major piece. A year had passed since the vote to banish Earth, a year in which the Concordance quietly learned a new vocabulary: caution, dependence, and the subtle terror of underestimating a species that thrives on hardship. The chamber was full again, though this time the atmosphere was taut with unease, not triumph. Delegates whispered behind translucent partitions, eyes darting toward the holographic displays floating above the floor. They showed human ships stationed at every critical choke point in frontier space. They showed stabilized colonies, pirate syndicates dismantled, and trade routes running smoother than they had in decades. Ward stepped forward, silver hair catching the ambient light. His presence was unassuming, yet commanding. No scepters, no robes, no pomp. Just a man who had outplayed the galaxy's finest bureaucrats without raising his voice. "You voted to exile us," he began, voice calm and resonant. "And in doing so, you reminded us who we are." A murmur ran through the chamber. Some delegates straightened, others looked away. Ward's eyes swept over them. "Humanity evolved on a world designed to kill us daily, storms that could strip cities bare, predators that could dismantle us, and neighbors that often did both in the same breath. We survived not because we were strongest, but because we adapted, fast, relentlessly, and without apology." He gestured to the projection above the dais, images of human warships tearing through pirate fleets, orbital bombardments conducted with surgical precision, colonies being stabilized under human oversight. "You mistook our cooperation for weakness," Ward continued, his tone sharpened with quiet ferocity. "Our humor for foolishness. Our restaurants for civility. And you thought we could be banished." A ripple of uneasy laughter passed through the chamber. Delegates who understood too late that they had gambled against a species that thrived under pressure. Ward leaned forward slightly, letting his words land. "We are not polite when threatened. We are not submissive when insulted. And we are never harmless. But," he added, voice softening. We are loyal to those who stand beside us. Admiral Naomi Iqbal stepped forward from the holographic overlay. Her voice was steady, authoritative, carrying the weight of countless battles fought without Concordance permission. The galaxy is dangerous, she said. You can face it arguing over procedure, or you can face it with the species that already knows how to fight in the dark, and thrive there. The delegates fell silent. Even XYR's mandibles clicked nervously. He had once sneered at humans for their improvisation, their stubbornness, their audacity. Now he watched, uncomfortably aware that the same traits had rendered his fleets impotent and his colonies exposed. Speaker Thauron finally spoke, voice quiet but firm. And the vote? Will Earth remain within the Concordance? Ward's eyes glimmered. Not as a junior member. Not as a subordinate. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Earth will remain because it chooses to remain. And the Concordance will benefit if it chooses to recognize reality. Another pause. Thauron swallowed. Terms? Iqbal's gaze swept across the chamber. 1. Humanity is sovereign. No sanctions, no votes on our existence. 2. We patrol where we deem necessary. 3. If we bleed for your worlds, we get a seat at every table that decides their fate. 4. She said, letting a small, almost imperceptible smile creep across her face. Trade tariffs on human restaurants are permanently abolished. For a moment, the chamber froze. Then, hesitantly, the delegates nodded. Even XYR. Even Thauron. Within weeks, human fleets returned to former Concordance space, not as junior enforcers, not as petitioners, but as guardians, as arbiters, as a power that operated on its own terms. Pirate fleets vanished. Trade stabilized. Frontier colonies flourished. The outer systems, once unguarded and vulnerable, now thrived under the watchful shadow of human oversight. In private quarters, Alvarez nudged Iqbal as she observed Earth-bound starports bustling with traffic. Think they learned? Iqbal allowed herself a thin, wry smile. They'll remember. For a long time. And if they forget? She glanced out at the horizon, where cargo ships streaked across the sky like falling stars. We'll remind them. Beyond the Perseus exclusion boundary, where human colonies had begun to sprout on worlds once deemed uninhabitable, shipyards forged fleets not out of conquest, but readiness. Terraforming rigs hummed quietly under new suns. Mining operations dug into rogue planets with ruthless efficiency. Humanity had not just survived exile, they had defined it. The galaxy had voted to cast Earth out. Instead, it had revealed the truth: you cannot cage a species that calls a death world home. You cannot outvote it, outmaneuver it, or underestimate it. And if you try, it will build a new map. It will guard it with railguns, dark humor, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Humanity hadn't begged to stay. They had simply shown what leaving really meant. And the galaxy, humbled, watched.